After our daughter was born, everything changed. My wife lost her grip on reality, threatening me, abandoning both me and our daughter in a whirlwind of chaos. Years later, she reappeared, this time with a rich new husband and a calculated plan to secure full custody, convinced she had the winning hand. What she didn't realize, however, was that I had an ace up my sleeve. My biggest dream growing up was always to be the best dad in the world. Since my teenage years, I pictured myself sipping hot coffee out of a quirky Father's Day mug, driving my kids to their sports practices, and making goofy faces during family portraits. It was a simple wish, but perfect in every way. That dream finally came true 5 years ago. The day my wife and I brought Isabella home remains one of the happiest moments of my life. I spent that first night by her side, singing off-key lullabies and changing her diapers, telling her about the day she'd run home from school with her little arms raised high, giving me handmade drawings of Superdad. I longed for that day, not knowing what was really ahead. But life doesn't always follow the script of a movie. My wife developed postpartum problems, a condition doctors had warned might occur because of her pre-existing mental health issues. They said mood swings might happen, but nothing this severe. Within 4 weeks of Isabella's arrival, my wife started lashing out as if overnight. Her anger became unpredictable. She turned violent, throwing things, screaming at Isabella just for crying, and hurling curses. I remember pleading with her one day to see a doctor, but her cold, piercing eyes left no room for compromise. Before long, her yelling escalated, causing Isabella to cry, and I had to lock myself in Isabella's room, holding her for hours. Gradually, my wife's temper left Isabella fearful and withdrawn. Her once joyful giggles at my silly faces were replaced by quiet, scared whimpers. She stopped being the cheerful little girl growing up in a warm home and became a timid child who even stopped crying to avoid her mother's wrath. I felt utterly broken each time I tried to comfort her. On her first birthday, something shifted. She spoke her first word, stop. At first, I was confused, then the painful truth hit me. Throughout her first year, she had heard me plead with her mother to stop so many times that stop became her way of expressing herself. My heart shattered that day, and I began divorce proceedings. The divorce was excruciating. My wife became even more aggressive, manipulating situations to make me surrender my house. Family courts favor the mother, she threatened. I initially stood my ground, but when she sent pictures of self-inflicted bruises as if I had hurt Isabella, I had no choice. After the divorce, I was left with little and ended up renting the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could find. The day Isabella and I moved and felt like the end of the world. It was as if everything was collapsing around me. Then I looked at her. She was giggling and playing, calling me Dada, while biting my thumb. That one little word, Dada, filled me with the strength I needed to carry on. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, even though every day was a struggle. I barely slept. I ate little, all to save enough to buy Isabella new clothes and toys. I looked like a zombie, but her smile was all the motivation I needed to rise and try again after 4 hours of sleep. Isabella changed too. She went from being too scared to cry to actually crying when she needed a diaper change. What could have been annoying became beautiful as I saw her begin to overcome the trauma. Eventually, she started hugging me and demanding cuddles. As she got older, she wouldn't even sleep until I told her a story. Then came the day that changed everything. One random Wednesday, I returned from work to find her drawing. She told me to close my eyes and wait. When I opened them, tears streamed down my face as I saw a simple stick figure drawing of us holding hands, with best dad ever scribbled above and a little note for me on the back. Her sparkling brown eyes met mine, and I scooped her up, holding her close as I cried, my tears flowing like a river. She wiped my tears with her sleeve and declared that if I was crying, she needed to cry too. Then she burst into an exaggerated fake cry that made me laugh. It was one of the happiest moments I'd ever felt. Unfortunately, not even a week later, everything turned upside down. Her mother contacted me, demanding full custody of Isabella. No visitation, no shared arrangements. I read the trembling papers in my hands. Her petition claiming that significant life changes meant she could now offer Isabella a stable and nurturing environment. She accused me of alienating Isabella from her, even though she had vanished for over 3 years. I collapsed on the couch, trying to figure out how to fight this, knowing I couldn't afford a top-tier lawyer. I called the only attorney I knew, the same one who helped with the original custody arrangements. He reviewed the paperwork with a grim expression. Jessica had married a wealthy man and moved into a lavish home in an upscale neighborhood. Now she claimed that her new life gave her the advantage I simply couldn't match. Apparently, her husband Michael was urging her to create a picture-perfect family, and having Isabella would complete that image. Yesterday, Isabella returned from preschool, buzzing with excitement about an upcoming father-daughter dance. She asked if we could shop for a special dress that weekend. I smiled and said yes, but inside, I trembled with fear. Would we ever truly be together for that dance, or would Jessica succeed in tearing our life apart? Today, I have to respond to the court summons. I have no idea how things will unfold, but one thing is clear, I won't give up on my daughter without a fight. I I spent all day reading up on custody laws online, my eyes burning from hours in front of the screen. The court date was set for 3 weeks from now, and I had to be ready. I called my old attorney, hoping he might offer a discount on his fees, but even his friends and family rate was more than I could afford. He advised me, document everything. Every time Isabella says something positive about living with you, write it down. Take photos of her doing homework or just playing happily. Courts care about stability and the child's best interest. I took his advice seriously. That night, I started a journal detailing Isabella's daily routines, our bedtime rituals, her favorite rabbit family book, and even her attempts at writing her name. I took pictures of our tidy apartment, proudly displaying Isabella's artwork on the walls. The next day, I visited her preschool and spoke with her teacher, Ms. Morgan, who recalled how shy Isabella had been at first and how she'd blossomed into one of the friendliest kids in class. Overcome with emotion, I nearly cried right then. Ms. Morgan even agreed to write a letter for the court about her progress, a small victory in an uphill battle. Later that day, while driving home, I watched Isabella excitedly chat about the class pet, a hamster named Cheese, until I remembered the court summons waiting on the kitchen counter. My stomach churned. That evening, after Isabella was asleep, I called my parents, who lived 3 states away. They couldn't do much practical work, but I needed their emotional support. My mom immediately offered to help with lawyer fees, insisting that family supports family, just as I had always taught Isabella. The next day, I used that money as a retainer to hire a lawyer specialized in family law named Sarah. Her small, neat office felt like a beacon of hope as she carefully listened to my story, taking notes. Jessica's 3-year absence works in your favor, she explained, but judges can be swayed by stories of dramatic turnarounds and second chances. We need to show that Isabella's best interest is to stay with you, her constant parent. I left feeling a bit more hopeful. At work, I explained the situation to my boss, who agreed to give me flexible hours during the court process, understanding the stakes as a fellow parent. That weekend, I took Isabella shopping for her dance dress as promised, and we found a purple dress with sparkles that made her twirl with delight. A saleswoman even remarked on how cute she was, filling me with both pride and dread. I couldn't lose her. While we were out, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Jessica, asking to see Isabella before the court date. My first instinct was to say no. She hadn't seen her daughter in 3 years. But Sarah had warned that seeming uncooperative might hurt my case. I texted back and proposed a public meeting at a nearby park. Jessica agreed, and we set a date for the following Saturday. I kept this meeting from Isabella, not wanting to raise her hopes or confuse her. The night before the meeting, sleep eluded me as I worried about what would happen. What if Isabella didn't recognize her mother? What if she was upset, or worse, manipulated? When morning finally came, we arrived at the park early. Isabella was excited about the playground, oblivious to the tension about to unfold. I spotted Jessica before she saw us. Dressed in designer clothes with perfect hair, expensive sunglasses framing her face, she was accompanied by Michael, her new husband. When Jessica approached, Isabella hid behind my legs, suddenly very shy around these strangers. Jessica knelt to Isabella's level and said, "Hi Isabella. Do you remember me? I'm your mommy." Confused, Isabella glanced up at me for confirmation. I nodded gently, and she then looked back at Jessica and said, "You're in the pictures." Jessica's smile wavered for a moment before she recovered, producing a gift-wrapped package and saying, "I brought you something special." Inside, there was an intricate doll that likely cost more than our entire weekly grocery bill. Isabella thanked her politely, just the way I had taught her to accept gifts, though she didn't seem all that excited. After a bit of awkward small talk, Jessica suggested grabbing ice cream. I agreed, and we headed over to a nearby shop. Michael hardly spoke to me, but was over the moon with Isabella, explaining the swimming pool at their house and the special room they'd set up for her. Isabella listened with wide eyes yet kept drifting back to me, and I noticed Jessica growing frustrated by this. She was just shy, as Jessica later mentioned loudly enough for me to hear. Once Isabella started living with us, she'd gradually open up more. I bit my tongue. Causing a scene wouldn't help anyone, especially not Isabella. The meeting wrapped up after about an hour, with Jessica promising Isabella they would see each other again soon. On our way home, Isabella stayed quiet, clutching her new doll. "Did you have fun?" I asked gently. "That lady is really my mom?" she inquired, confused. I nodded and said, "Yes, but she's been away for a while. Do I need to go live with her now?" My heart sank at the worry in her voice. "No, sweetheart, you're staying with me. The judge just needs to speak with all of us to ensure everything's all right." She seemed content with that answer. Yet that night, around midnight, she climbed into my bed, a rare event after many months. The following week turned into a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah helped me gather documents, Isabella's school records, medical history, even receipts proving I had always provided for her. Ms. Morgan delivered a letter praising Isabella's progress and how well she was adjusting. Meanwhile, Jessica ramped up her efforts, sending Isabella expensive gifts almost every day, toys, clothes, even a tablet that I felt was totally inappropriate for a 5-year-old. I kept records of each gift, but let Isabella keep them. I didn't want her caught in the middle. 2 days before the court date, I received a disturbing call from Isabella's preschool. Jessica had shown up there, demanding to see Isabella and insisting she had legal rights as her mother. Thankfully, the school called me before letting her in, though it left me rattled. I immediately contacted Sarah, who filed an emergency motion to restrict Jessica from contacting Isabella outside of scheduled meetings. The night before court, Isabella sensed my anxiety despite my efforts to hide it. As I tucked her in, she reached up and patted my cheek. "Don't worry, Daddy. I want to stay with you," she said with the simple certainty of a child. I managed to keep it together until closing her bedroom door, then sat alone on the kitchen floor, silently crying. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Court day came under gray skies and light rain. My neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, a retired kindergarten teacher who adored Isabella, had agreed to look after her for the day. Isabella gave me an extra tight hug before I left, as if she understood the day's importance. The courtroom, with its polished wood and formal air, felt intimidating. Jessica was already there with Michael and their lawyer, who looked rather sharp in his tailored suit. Sarah squeezed my arm reassuringly as we took our seats. Judge Taylor, an older woman, reviewed the case files before addressing everyone. Jessica's lawyer went first, portraying a mother who had erred but had since turned her life around, capable of giving Isabella every advantage, emphasizing the beautiful home, excellent school district, and financial stability. He even suggested that I had intentionally kept Isabella from her mother. When it was Sarah's turn, she presented a detailed case showing my consistent care for Isabella. She provided Ms. Morgan's letter, photos of our daily life together, and medical records proving I'd never missed a checkup or vaccination. Most importantly, she underscored Jessica's 3-year absence. Your Honor, Miss Parker voluntarily disappeared from Isabella's life during critical years of development. Now that Mr. Thompson has created a stable, loving home, Jessica's claim is based solely on material advantages, Sarah argued. The judge asked pointed questions of both parties, and seemed particularly curious as to why Jessica hadn't used her visitation rights for so long. Jessica claimed she'd been working on herself and didn't want to expose Isabella to her struggles, and I noted she never apologized for abandoning her daughter. After several hours, Judge Taylor called a recess and ordered both parties to meet with a court-appointed evaluator who would assess both households along with Isabella's well-being. The final hearing would take place after the evaluation was complete. Outside the courtroom, Jessica approached me while Michael hovered protectively behind her. "This would be easier if you just were reasonable," she whispered. "Isabella deserves the best life possible. You know you can't give her what we can. She deserves stability and love." I countered, "Those aren't things you can buy." She laughed lightly. "So noble, but let's be realistic. You have your apartment, your job. Do you really think that's the best for her? We already have a college fund set up." I walked away before I could say something I might regret. Sarah caught up with me in the parking lot. "You did well in there," she assured me. The judge was troubled by Jessica's long absence. "Now we just need the evaluation to go smoothly." Evaluator Dr. Williams scheduled home visits for the following week. I spent days cleaning our apartment until Isabella's room looked its best and stocked the fridge with healthy food. It felt silly to be so nervous. This was our everyday life, but I knew so much depended on his impression. On the day of the evaluation, Isabella was in a good mood. She proudly showed Dr. Williams her books, her small stuffed animal collection, and the little art corner we shared. I answered his questions honestly about our routines, discipline methods, and how we talked with Isabella about her mother and her bedroom situation. Our 2-bedroom apartment may be small, but Isabella has her own room, I explained. She helps decorate it, choosing her bedding and all. Dr. Williams nodded and made notes as he spent nearly 2 hours with us, observing our interactions and speaking with Isabella one-on-one before leaving. He thanked both of us and gave Isabella a sticker, which she immediately placed on her favorite stuffed rabbit. A few days later, I learned Dr. Williams had also visited Jessica's home, news that came through the preschool grapevine. Apparently, Jessica had transformed her space into a princess room complete with a canopy bed and custom murals. I tried not to let it upset me. Surely, the evaluator would look beyond material things. Still, doubt began to creep in. The week following the evaluations, I received a troubling call from Mrs. Johnson. Jessica had shown up at our apartment building, asking neighbors about me, what time I got home, whether I ever had visitors, and if they ever heard Isabella crying. It felt like she was gathering evidence against me. Sarah advised me to document everything but not to confront Jessica, saying it only made her look desperate. Then, the final straw occurred when Isabella returned from preschool upset and confused. Apparently, Jessica had once again shown up and told Isabella that soon she'd be living in a big, beautiful house with a real mommy. Ms. Morgan had to step in, but the damage was done. That night, after a nightmare, Isabella clung to me and whispered, "I don't want to go away, Daddy." I held her tightly and promised, "I'm doing everything I can to keep you right here." Sarah filed another motion the next day to prevent Jessica from contacting Isabella at school, and the judge granted it immediately. This gave me hope that Jessica's manipulative tactics were being seen through. 2 weeks later, Dr. Williams submitted his report, and we were called back to court. I sat anxiously while Judge Taylor reviewed the evaluation. Jessica appeared confident, whispering occasionally to Michael and her lawyer. Finally, Judge Taylor cleared her throat and addressed the court. "I've reviewed Dr. Williams' thorough evaluation of both households. While Mrs. Parker Donnie's home offers certain material advantages, Dr. Williams found Mr. Thompson's environment to be warm, stable, and completely appropriate for Isabella's needs." My heart soared, though I kept my face neutral. The judge continued, I am particularly concerned with Dr. Williams' observation of Isabella's anxiety about potential changes in her living situation. Her report indicates that she is thriving in her current home and has expressed a clear preference to remain with her father. Jessica's face hardened, and her lawyer quickly objected, arguing that a 5-year-old's preference shouldn't carry so much weight. Judge Taylor acknowledged this, but noted, "The child's emotional well-being is relevant." She added, "I also find troubling the pattern of Mrs. Parker Donnie's attempts to influence Isabella outside proper channels, especially after being absent for 3 years during critical developmental periods." After adjusting her glasses, she delivered her ruling. "I will maintain primary physical custody with Mr. Thompson, and Jessica will receive gradually increasing visitation rights, starting with supervised visits contingent on her completion of parenting classes." Jessica abruptly stood, her chair scraping loudly. "This is ridiculous. I'm her mother," she protested. "Mrs. Parker Donnelly, control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt," Judge Taylor warned. "Motherhood is not just a biological fact, but a relationship built over time. You have a lot of rebuilding to do outside the courtroom." I called Mrs. Johnson with the news, and I could hear Isabella in the background asking questions. "Tell her I'm bringing home pizza to celebrate," I said, my voice breaking with relief as I hung up. I saw Jessica and Michael leaving the building. Jessica stopped when our eyes met, her expression unreadable. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I'll be seeing a lot more of Isabella now, and eventually, she'll see which life is better." I took a deep breath and replied, "I hope you do become a consistent part of her life. She deserves that, but never think you can buy her love." Without replying, she turned away. I watched them get into their expensive car, feeling not triumphant but drained and worried. This victory mattered, yet I knew it wasn't the end of our story. Jessica would now play a role in Isabella's life, a complication I'd have to handle carefully. That evening, Isabella and I ate pizza on our living room floor while watching her favorite movie. Later, when I tucked her in, she seemed more at ease than she had in weeks. "Daddy," she whispered as I kissed her goodnight, "I'm glad I get to stay in our home." "Me too, sweetheart," I said with a smile. "Me too." The next morning, reality hit. Isabella's first supervised visit with Jessica was set for the following weekend. I had to get her emotionally ready while setting aside my own tangled feelings, and I still needed to figure out how to pay the mounting legal fees if Jessica decided to contest the custody arrangement again. For now, watching Isabella hum as she ate her cereal, I felt grateful that we'd won this battle. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. I prepared Isabella as best I could for her visit, not wanting to make a big fuss, but knowing she needed a little warning. That night at dinner, when she went unusually quiet, she asked, "What if she wants me to call her mommy?" while pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. "I barely know her, so call her whatever feels right," I replied. "Maybe just her name at first. No one can make you say anything you're not comfortable with." The visit took place at a community center set up for supervised meetings. The supervisor, an older woman named Susan with a kind face, seemed genuinely intent on making Isabella feel at ease. Jessica arrived 15 minutes late with another fancy gift, and Isabella hid behind my legs until Susan gently led her into the playroom. I sat in a gloomy waiting room with outdated magazines and stiff chairs. Those 2 hours dragged on. When Isabella finally came out, she looked drained but all right, and Susan gave me a thumbs up, a sign I took as good. She even treated me to ice cream. On the drive home, Isabella said, "Next time we could go to the zoo if Susan says it's okay." I nodded and asked if she'd had fun, and she shrugged, that typical kid gesture when trying to process everything. That night, she climbed into my bed again and fell asleep holding my hand. Visits became a Saturday routine, and after about a month, Isabella's anxiety eased. She even began to look forward to them a bit because Jessica always planned an elaborate activity or brought amazing snacks. I couldn't compete with that, but I kept our normal, steady routine. One day after a visit, Isabella came home with her nails painted bright pink, decorated with glitter stars. She was beaming and said, "Jessica did my nails. I can call her that instead of mommy if I want." She wasn't upset, which surprised me. Maybe Jessica was finally putting Isabella's needs first. I helped Isabella touch up her nail polish later that week when it started chipping, and she talked about Jessica as if maybe they could really have a relationship. Then, about 3 months into the visits, the bombshell came. I got served with papers. Jessica was asking for a change in the custody arrangement. She wanted unsupervised visits and overnight stays every other weekend. Her reasoning was that Isabella was clearly more comfortable with her now, and the supervisor's reports were all positive. I called Sarah immediately. She wasn't as worried as I was, explaining that the judge had planned the supervised visits as a stepping stone. If they went well, the court might allow unsupervised time next. Still, something felt off. Isabella had started talking about the huge playroom at Jessica's house and all the cool toys there. It felt like Jessica was deliberately building a fantasy world to draw Isabella in. The hearing was scheduled for the next month. In the meantime, I began noticing small changes in Isabella. She started comparing our apartment unfavorably to Jessica's house, asking why we couldn't have a swimming pool or a trampoline in our backyard. One day, She excitedly announced that Michael had promised to teach her horseback riding once she began staying overnight. I tried not to show my frustration. That sounds fun, but remember, horses are a big responsibility. It's not just about riding them, I said. She rolled her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I know Michael has horses at his lake house with special people to take care of them, she replied. How was I supposed to compete with horses and lake houses? I brought it up with Sarah, who advised me to document these conversations without making a huge deal for Isabella. Kids are impressionable. She said Jessica was clearly trying to buy Isabella's affection, but sooner or later, Isabella would see through it. The day before the hearing, Isabella came home from her visit unusually quiet. I asked about her day, but she only shrugged and went to her room. Later, I found her sitting on her bed, looking at a photo album I'd made of our life together. Everything okay, sweetie? I asked. She nodded and hesitated before saying, Jessica said, I'll have my own bathroom when I stay overnight, with special towels that have my name on them. That sounds nice. I replied carefully, and she added that maybe I didn't want her to go because I was jealous of all the fancy things Jessica had. I took a deep breath to steady my anger. Using a 5-year-old as a messenger is never okay, Bella. Money isn't what makes a home. It's love, safety, and knowing that someone is always there for you. She nodded and leaned against me. I know, I like our home. The next day's hearing was tense. Jessica arrived perfectly put together, while I felt disheveled even in my best shirt. Her lawyer presented the positive supervisor reports and argued for lifting the restrictions. Sarah countered, raising concerns that Jessica was using material things to sway Isabella and had made inappropriate comments about me. The judge listened carefully to both sides. To my surprise, Susan, the supervisor, was asked to speak. She explained that while the visits seemed fine on the surface, she was worried that Jessica was trying to buy Isabella's affection with constant gifts and activities instead of building a genuine connection. The judge considered this and ruled that Jessica could have unsupervised daytime visits, but overnight visits would be postponed for another 3 months, and Jessica was ordered not to promise any future arrangements or purchases to Isabella. Jessica was clearly unhappy with the compromise, but she maintained her composure in court. As she left, she walked past me without a word, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile. For the next 2 months, things went relatively smoothly. With unsupervised visits, I no longer got Susan's insights, but Isabella was fine when she returned. She talked less about extravagant toys and more about normal parent-child activities like baking cookies or going to the movies. I started to think that maybe Jessica had finally gotten the message, that she was trying to be a real parent rather than just playing the part. Then one Sunday, Isabella came home with news that made my blood run cold. Jessica and Michael were moving to Florida. They were buying a house near Disney World, and I could visit during school vacations. My heart sank. Florida was a 20-hour drive away. This meant Isabella would have to fly alone multiple times a year, spend holidays apart from me, and Jessica might file for more custody changes in a state where I had no support. I immediately called Sarah, who filed an emergency motion to block the relocation of visitation out of state. The judge granted a temporary freeze while the matter was reviewed, which sent Jessica into a rage. That night, she called, screaming that I was ruining her life and that Isabella deserved the opportunity she could provide. The next day, Jessica missed her scheduled visits repeatedly. Isabella was confused and hurt, asking if Jessica was angry at her. I tried to explain that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings that aren't the kid's fault, but it was hard to justify Jessica's sudden disappearance. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Jessica's lawyer. They were withdrawing the petition for custody modification. Apparently, Jessica and Michael had decided to go forward with their move without waiting for the court's decision. They'd already bought property in Florida and even joined a yacht club, whatever that meant. The lawyer's tone was coldly professional, but it was clear Jessica had chosen her new lifestyle over regular contact with her daughter. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or heartbroken for Isabella. After consulting with Sarah and Isabella's therapist, we agreed that honesty was best, but we needed to frame it so Isabella wouldn't feel abandoned. That weekend, over ice cream, I explained that Jessica and Michael had moved very far away and wouldn't be visiting regularly, though Jessica might call or visit when in town. Isabella was quiet for a moment, pushing her spoon through her hot fudge sundae, and finally asked, "Is it because I don't want to call her mommy?" My heart broke. No, sweetheart. Grown-ups make choices for complicated reasons, but none of this is because of anything you did. She nodded, not entirely convinced. Over the following weeks, she asked about Jessica less and less. Jessica called only once in a stiff conversation where Isabella mostly replied with one-word answers, and she promised to send birthday and Christmas presents, which, given her knack for grand gestures, I suspected she would. 6 months later, Isabella rarely mentioned her mother. She was thriving in kindergarten, had made close friends, and had even started taking dance classes that she loved. I was promoted at work, which meant a bit more financial stability and the chance to start a small college fund for her. On the 1-year anniversary of winning the initial custody case, a package arrived for Isabella. Inside was an elegant doll and a card signed "Love, Jessica." Isabella glanced at it briefly before returning to the fort we'd built in the living room. Don't you want to play with your new doll? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe later. Can you hand me the red blanket for our roof? That night, as I tucked her in, Isabella hugged me extra tight. Daddy, are we always going to live together? She asked. Someday, when you're older, you might want your own place, I teased. But until then, yes, we're always together. She smiled and closed her eyes, satisfied with that answer. As I turned off the light, I noticed her latest drawing taped to the wall. A picture of two stick figures holding hands under a bright sun, with me and my dad, written in wobbly kindergarten letters. In that moment, I realized I had become the world's greatest dad, not because of a mug or a t-shirt, but because, despite everything, Isabella felt safe, loved, and truly at home. No court battle, fancy house, or Disney World vacation could ever compare to that feeling.